understand that after that video, I basically don't even need to preach at all. But I'm going to try. So I invite you to pray with me. Oh, God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. Oh, God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Okay, so I'm still kind of feeling the snake a little bit of reeling, the part of me that is obviously more predatee than predator, prey even, is a little bit scared. Because there's something really visceral about snakes, right? And goodness gracious, it is hard not to watch that video and identify with the iguana. If you are a progressive person of faith in this country, and you have a couple of facets of privilege to stack on top of one another, like many of us do, this week might feel a little bit like we asked for a fish and were given a snake. Maybe even a whole field full of snakes. Like you thought you were just making your way through a little patch of the Galapagos Islands trying to get home to your buds, and then suddenly there were snakes everywhere. And you knew that snakes existed, and you knew that they were somewhere doing snaky stuff, like twisting around things and dislocating their jaws in cool but also terrifying ways. But then all of a sudden they were everywhere. All of a sudden, heteropatriarchy, racism, xenophobia, transphobia, and a lack of caring for creation have been given free rein to snap at you. And it's scary. You asked for a fish, and you were given a snake. Disappointing outcomes. Scary outcomes, not hoped for outcomes. Can lead to big questions about God. Big questions about God's faithfulness. Big questions about if prayer has any power. Big questions about what to do next. Thankfully, we have a whole playbook, a whole collection of 66 books, advice and stories told and gathered by a group of people who were oppressed, for a group of people who were oppressed. And so we have a really useful resource in the Bible for what to do when power is not on your side. Tonight's part of one of these books, this small part of Matthew 7, gives us 3 things we can do. 3 things that help us think about God's faithfulness, the power of prayer, and what to do next. And they are: persist, pray, and do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. If our tiny iguana friend had given up when he first encountered the first snake, he would have been toast. If he had given up when he got caught in that absolutely horrifying twisty knot of snakes, he would have been toast. If he'd given up on that last rocky outcrop when that last snake was chasing him, you've got it again, toast. But our friend persisted. That little iguana kept going over ground and through snake knots and up outcrops, and it was only in the persistence that he or she got home safe. Faithfulness is a 2-way street. It's a team sport. It is us with God. We see as far as we can see, and then we ask, we search, and we knock our way through. We persist, seeking justice and right relationship even when we can't see the whole picture or the whole plan. That's where it's super helpful that prayer exists. If you then know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So I can't with confidence say that much about the prayer life of that iguana, but I can say that in my own prayer life, Prayer has been as much about me convincing God of things as it has been about God changing my heart. And perhaps the latter more than the former. Prayer is a conversation that we have with God. Sometimes, like Moses in the wilderness or Abraham with Sodom and Gomorrah, God's heart is moved and they change their mind. More often, we change ours. The older I get, the deeper I hope my faith gets, the more often my prayers confess to God that this is what I want. But not your will, not my will, but your will be done. More and more often I try to remember that I have only my perspective, that I have sight of some but not the whole, and that ultimately, by the grace of God, we are building not Rachel's kingdom, but God's kingdom on earth. Prayer helps. More often than not, something moves and shifts and lets us see God more clearly, lets us see ourselves more clearly, lets us see our neighbor more clearly. And it is good to see our neighbors more clearly because we are invited to, in everything, do to others as you would have them do unto you. And that's a hard thing to do if you see your neighbors as snakes. This is the hardest and the best part of the sermon. It's the honeycomb secret. It's the gold at the end of the rainbow. Our little iguana friends made their way through a bunch of real and present danger. Snakes everywhere trying to eat them. And our bud made his way home to community, to all the other iguanas. And there's wisdom there. When the world is scary and you need to find your people and experience safety and love and community, that is real. And we are invited to not stop there. Because we are humans, we are not iguanas. And together we are made in the image of God. We are invited to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. For this sums up the law and the prophets. One part of the law it sums up is Leviticus 19. And Leviticus 19:18 says this: "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." You might ask, who are these others? Who is my neighbor? For the Jewish people hearing Jesus preach on the side of a mountain, a neighbor was someone who lived trustingly beside you, someone with whom you were in covenant community. It was close and it was personal. And so for just a second, it seems like maybe we have a huge out and we can just stay in safety with other iguanas like us. But then, along comes Leviticus 19:33, and that says, "When an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the native born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." God is clear, and we are humans and not iguanas. We are called to love our neighbors, no matter how much or how little they are like us, no matter how much or little they like us. It's a difficult invitation. It requires courage. It requires persistence and prayer, and yes, it requires dwelling in community with other safe iguanas. But we don't stop there. I think most of us, most of the people in this room, have access to some facet of privilege. Privilege of citizenship, of religion, of wealth, property, gender, ethnicity, ability, education, housing, language. Many of us have privilege stacked on privilege. I have almost every facet of privilege that you can have except maleness. And that means that I get to lay those privileges down to love my neighbor. Friends, the outlook is grim. The terrain is covered in snakes. Heteropatriarchy, racism, xenophobia, transphobia, a lack of care for creation have been given free rein to snap at us. And that's real, and that's scary. And to respond, we need community. We need each other. We need other people who are safe people to hold us in the midst. We need to be that part of the church. And as and after we are held, we have an invitation from God to be another part of the church too. We have a playbook from oppressed people for how to respond to oppression. An invitation to persist, to pray, and to love our neighbors. May God grant that it might not be our will, but God's will that is done. Amen.